Hi, it's Lerald, and in this video I'm going to talk about probably the most important and most difficult mechanic in Path of Exile 2 right now, Simulacrum. So I really wanted to make this video because Delirium has been so good to me over this past weekend. I basically only had like one day to really lock in and blast for like a very long play session. That was Saturday. And other than that, I really didn't have much time to play over the weekend, and even so, in that time, I started out that kind of farm session with 2 Divines, and maybe like 900 Exalted Orbs, and this is like what I've amassed since then. You know, I've got this perfect Jeweler's Orb, probably like 2,800 Exalts, about 30-something Divines, and all of this came either from stuff that I farmed and sold, you know, like valuable rares that I kind of picked up and ID'd and then sold off, or just raw Divines, raw Exalted Orbs, raw Simulacrum Splinters that I combined and sold off. So I would say I made about 55 Divines or so in the span of like a day. And so I really just wanted to talk about Simulacrum because Delirium is the reason that I was able to farm so much currency in pretty much one sitting. You know, I wasn't really going crazy. It was just being like a normal Saturday afternoon, kind of getting in there blasting for most of the day. And even so, massive amount of currency coming from that. And it's just so good that I don't even mind blowing up my farm strategy. It's just too good to keep all to myself. So I would say Delirium is the best, most important juicing mechanic in PoE 2. I do think it is better than Breach. Obviously, they're not mutually exclusive. You absolutely can and should be doing them together, but Breach is easier and really not as rewarding as Delirium, which kind of makes sense. Higher difficulty, higher reward. The problem with Delirium is you have to run a minimum of 2 successful simulacrums, whatever, in order to really make it worthwhile, so you can take Get Out of My Head, so you will start picking up randomly anointed maps, and then more importantly, Would You Like to See My Face, so that you get double the amount of Simulacrum Splinters. Right now, Simulacrum Splinters are roughly like 2 of them for 1 Exalt, around that price, and so, you know, I can do a map and pick up 50, I can do a map and pick up 120 of them, and obviously being able to walk around a map and pick up 60 raw Exalted Orbs, that ain't happening, but picking up 60 Exalted Orbs worth of Simulacrum Splinters, that's commonplace. Now the other 2 nodes that I've taken, they're coming to get you, and the mirrors, these just kind of add a lot more juice. Definitely they're worth it if you're able to do those 3rd and 4th Simulacrums, but really it's about getting those first 2 done. That is the key to unlocking all of the big earning potential that comes from running Delirium in your maps. So obviously finishing Simulacra is really important. It basically doubles the value of Delirium in your maps. It cuts the cost way down as well thanks to Get Out of My Head. The money printer goes burr. But also Simulacrum is hard. It's not free in both senses of the word. You know, Simulacrum costs like 1 to 1.5 Divines a piece. So they're actually kind of expensive, but also they are a big test of your character's tankiness in terms of mitigation, effective health, and sustain. This is the big challenge of Simulacrum, much more so than like damage output or clear speed, or certainly your like move speed. You do need some damage output for sure, but staying alive is the hard part of Simulacrum. Killing the monsters is not. So Simulacrums can require a pretty substantial shift in your passive tree, your auras, and your general playstyle to complete them successfully. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So let's just get into it. Why run Simulacrum? I think I've already kind of nailed it, but you know, you need it for these Deli Atlas points, and these are what make Delirium good. Like without the Atlas points, Delirium kind of stinks. Like I said, I played 1 day and I farmed like 55 Divines in, I would say like 10 hours of not really very focused gaming. Simulacrum also does drop some valuable, well, I wrote down uniques, but it's not true. It drops valuable unique. It drops Melting Maelstrom, which is worth 20 Divines, and unfortunately that's the only good unique, but it's also available on difficulty 0 Simulacrum, so it is actually pretty attainable. It is supposedly an 8% drop rate according to the wiki, which is low, but it's not that low. It's like 1 in 12 or 1 in 13. That's actually attainable, right? Simulacrum also drops currency and useful rares. I've run 6 successful Simulacrums this weekend, and I found 3 raw Divines. Was that good luck? I mean, yeah, maybe. I've also gotten a pretty decent handful of like good rare drops and chance orbs and plenty of valuable emotions as well. And then maybe the best part of Simulacrums in PoE 2 is that unlike in PoE 1, they're actually pretty fast. I did a Simulacrum while making this video just to kind of make some notes along the way, and including the time that I spent swapping auras and gems and gear and making notes along the way, it took me 13 minutes. So if you're just going in and blasting on repeat, I think you can clear these things out in 10 minutes or less. Also, there's no other setup. You will want to tweak your build, but that's it. There's no towers, no tablets, no map rolling. You just put in the Simulacrum and then you get in there and you just start blasting like Frank from Always Sunny. I actually found my last Simulacrum easier than my first. I don't know, this doesn't make sense, but it was my experience. I failed my first 4 Simulacrum attempts. I was very, very frustrated by that, but I felt like success just simply would not be possible. But then I made the breakthrough. I finally got through, I succeeded. I managed to roll through all of the simulacrums after that in one fell swoop, because I realized that really what was causing all the problem is that I just needed to change my thinking and approach simulacrums differently from how I had been blasting through maps. So the way I eventually succeeded was through a combination of more effective health and evasion. Essentially, I played a build that had a huge combined life and mana pool, a mind over matter stat stacker. I've made some videos talking about this. But then I also used Wind Dancer and several evasion notables to boost my admittedly kind of bad evasion up to respectable values. I also added in some jewels that had evasion on them. I can point out a couple of them here. And then I took these 2 points into Bestial Skin, which isn't an amazing node considering I'm not wearing a super evasion heavy body armor, but it was enough to get me over 50% evasion with Wind Dancer, and that was actually good enough. Okay, so here are the absolute basics of Simulacrum. You farm Simulacra by running Delirium in your maps. Monsters killed in the Delirium Fog can drop Simulacrum Splinters. You combine 300 of them, that turns into a Simulacrum. You put that Simulacrum into the Waygate on the Atlas near the starting point, it opens 6 portals, and the Simulacrum still uses the 1 death mechanic, which is... I mean, there's no way around it, right? It's kind of bad with the way the Simulacrums are tuned right now. They are death machines. Now, as someone who clears them without difficulty, if I'm being honest, and benefits from the fact that other players are struggling, I still think they should be nerfed. I want to repeat that because I know there's going to be some stupid comments from people saying that they shouldn't be nerfed. I think you are wrong. I think you are a bozo. They are in-game content, they are high-level in-game content, but I still think they're overtuned right now, right? It is to my personal benefit that Simulacra are not nerfed. Like I said, I made 55 divines in a single day because they are expensive, and they are expensive because they're not nerfed. But I care more about game balance than my currency tab. They should be more accessible to more people. Each Simulacrum lasts 15 waves, and the level of deliriousness of the monsters, or I think technically delirious is, it doesn't matter really who deliriousness is applied to, but also the amount of monster modifiers will increase with each wave. Now, by around wave 10, you're going to have more monster damage and more monster life as a modifier on pretty much every single wave, along with a host of other really bad synergistic mods like extra cold damage and monsters penetrate elemental resistances, or monsters gain 50% extra elemental resistances. So if you can add elemental penetration into your build and you're doing elemental damage, you should do that. It will help a lot, especially on those waves. There's really no shame in zoning out before a wave to go swap points around with Doriani if you need to. The only real shame in Simulacrum is in dying. Starting a wave destroys everything on the ground, so be sure to pick up anything remotely useful to you after each wave. There is a stash in the Simulacrum, so you don't have to zone out to clear your inventory. Just set up a dump tab, scoop everything up, and then throw it in the stash every couple of waves. Each wave consists of monsters spawning all around the arena in big shards of broken glass. They emerge from those shards. I think they're supposed to be mirror fragments. I think that's the aesthetic that they're going for. I actually think it's pretty cool. I like that aspect of Delirium and Simulacrum. I think it's a lot better than PoE 1's approach. The fog and the black and white, on the other hand, I'm really not as big a fan of. I think it makes the game ugly, and that's a shame because PoE 2 is a really beautiful game when you're not slapping Delirium on it. Now, the monsters spawn, and they pretty much attack instantly. Most of them attack by leap slamming onto you. This is probably the biggest danger throughout Simulacrum from the start all the way through to the end. There's really not a great counterplay to monsters spawning and attacking instantly other than, constantly moving or being a spark sorceress. Righteous Fire and Cyclone would both be great counterplays to this, but they don't exist in PoE 2 yet, so the best tools for hitting enemies the instant they spawn just, aren't available. Anything that attacks very quickly or covers the area will work. So in order to get your Atlas passives, you do need to complete progressively higher difficulty Simulacra. This means putting your passives in and increasing the difficulty on the tree. To be honest, the ramp up in difficulty really doesn't feel that high. It is there, but it's not as big as the jump from regular mapping into your first Simulacrum. The only mechanical difference is that you will start at 10 higher deliriousness with each level of Simulacrum difficulty, and the deliriousness will cap 10% higher as well. So rank 0 is 10% to 100% from the start of the Simulacrum to the end. Rank 1 would be 20 to 110, and then all the way up to rank 4, which is the maximum, that starts at 50 and goes up to 140. That is actually a pretty substantial jump in difficulty from a rank 0 at that 10 to 100 range. The other difference with the higher ranked simulacrums is that there are some uniques that can only drop at the higher ranks, and if I pull up the Simulacrum page from the PoE wiki here, you can see Collapsing Horizon, Struggle Scream, and the Megalomaniac. These can all drop only at difficulty 3 and difficulty 4, and the thing is they actually do reduce your chance of getting a Melting Maelstrom, and Collapsing Horizon, this is a 1 Exalt unique, Struggle Scream, 1 Exalt unique, Megalomaniac can be really good if you get a really good roll and it's a really valuable skill, but usually this is going to be a 1 Exalt unique as well. So you're reducing your chance of getting a really good valuable item, by doing higher difficulty, so it's harder and less rewarding. Now the difference here is that doing higher level obviously is required to continue getting more points, and that may actually wind up being more rewarding on average due to the deliriousness being higher, and so the end of wave rewards might be better doing higher level delirium or simulacrum, but the chance of failure is obviously going to be higher. So I think once you've finished all of your simulacrums for points, I think spam running zeros if you wanted to try and farm Melting Maelstrom. I actually think that's probably the play. It's a bit counterintuitive. All right, so now I want to talk about the layout of simulacrums. There's really only one version of it for now at least, and unlike in PoE 1 where it resembles one of the towns in the game and it's the same map throughout the entire simulacrum, the PoE 2 version resembles a lot of Act 1 areas kind of smashed into one, with mirror shards kind of separating the sections of the big area apart from each other. Now, as you complete waves, the walls around the area that are kind of made up of these mirror shards will break, and it's a very cool mechanic. They'll break at the end of the wave, and then you have to run through them into another section of the simulacrum to continue doing waves. I do think it's very cool looking. Now, as for the rooms, I think for the most part, they're large arenas that are pretty nondescript. They're big open rooms or medium open rooms, all very normal, fine. However, there is one section of the simulacrum that I've taken to calling the Hallway of Death, and that's because it's an incredibly narrow hallway that is ringed by mirrors on all sides, and monsters spawn pretty much immediately in melee range of you throughout the entire wave. There's really not a lot you can do about it, and it's terrible. It's just really, really bad. You're setting up players to fight a bunch of really dangerous melee monsters inside of a phone booth, if anybody remembers what those are, and because of the combination of ramping difficulty with each wave and random simulacrum mods, your best course of action is to basically just hope you get that section of the simulacrum as an early wave with decent mods, and that's not good. It's definitely not good when it's combined with a design of one death and the simulacrum is over. I've died to that stupid hallway section more than everything else in Simulacrum combined. Alright, now I'm going to talk about the main dangers in Simulacrum, and I would say that there are 4 main threats. The first one I've mentioned a lot, it's the leap slam monsters. They do exactly what I'm saying. They leap slam on you, you have to move out of that, constantly you have to be moving. The second would be rare monster affixes, and you really do have to hunt down the rares when they have these bad affixes and take them out of the game immediately. And the 4 that really stick out to me, I've been thinking more about it, are temporary invulnerability, proximal tangibility, temporal bubble, and mana siphoner. These are all terrible because they limit your ability to move around freely and safely for one reason or another, whether it's immuning all the nearby monsters so you get stuck and trapped, or slowing you down with the temporal bubble, or stealing all your mana from the stupid mana siphoner. All 4 of these are really, really bad. And then the other 2 dangers are Omniphobia and Chosis. So Omniphobia and Chosis are the 2 bosses of Simulacrum, and they're somewhere between a map boss and a rare in terms of difficulty. I do find them to be quite dangerous, but really not very tanky. It's quite a change from PoE 1. Omniphobia starts showing up in the first 5 rounds, and Chosis shows up a little later on, and then they both appear in all of the last 5 rounds or so. The wiki says otherwise, but my experience has been different. So like I said, neither of them feels very tanky, but Chosis occasionally will cast a big beam skill that completely refills his energy shield, so he is the tankier of the 2. Omniphobia is actually quite a lot more dangerous in PoE 2 than he was in PoE 1. He has this big leap slam that can absolutely kill you, and I think the leap slam monsters are basically just a scaled down version of Omniphobia. He also has a big frontal slam with his axe, so the best course of action is to try and stay fairly close to him, keep moving, and always try to spin behind him. You know, just kind of like you do with every other boss in the game, right? Kosis is a bit more technical. He dual wields swords and melees very hard and very quickly. He will also auto-attack fireballs at you if you're at range, so once again you want to stay close to him and spin behind his back as well, but he will also teleport out of melee range periodically and continue throwing fireballs, so you do have to kind of move around a lot. He channels a beam that puts a bunch of blobs onto the ground, and then he will leap onto the blobs to create a wave of explosions out from the blobs. Alright, now I want to talk about some of the differences from player setup as opposed to mapping. So Herald of Ice does absolutely nothing in Simulacrums. Monsters despawn on death instead of exploding. They are freezable though, so Ice Bite as a support if you're playing an ice build will still work. Many monsters spawn in by leap slamming, I've said this a bunch, but you know, because pretty much everything in the Simulacrum likes to auto-attack, evasion is really important here. Wind Dancer is a very valuable aura to run in Simulacrum. Blind is great, Maim is also a good option. You can put both of those as supports on Wind Dancer and it works really well. Block is also a good defensive layer for pretty much the same reason as evasion. Defensive sustain is also pretty important. You are going to be kind of getting whittled down all the time, so like life gain on kill can be useful, whether from jewels or from like pieces of gear, jewelry, or whatever. Grim Feast is a great aura if you're playing an energy shield build. Ghost Dance is great if you're playing energy shield and evasion. Mana Remnants if you're playing Mind Over Matter and also playing a lightning build. And if you're not using any of these auras, I do think that is a mistake, essentially. It's not impossible to clear Simulacrums without them, but it is really increasing the difficulty on yourself by quite a lot, and I think that armor really just isn't a great alternative to evasion and energy shield or mana. Not that it can't work, I just think you're basically tying a hand behind your back. Now, the best possible Mind Over Matter option really is Melting Maelstrom. You know, it's kind of ironic that the best tool for clearing Simulacrums is from Simulacrum. Maybe not, maybe that makes perfect sense, I'm not sure. Really, there's more of a problem with how overtuned Mind Over Matter is right now. I think if Mind Over Matter was 40% like it is in PoE 1, then Melting Maelstrom wouldn't really be a trump card, but that would require a lot more work on the rest of the game's balance in order for it to function correctly. And then the next little tip I have is Omen of Resurgence. I like having one of these in my inventory pretty much all the time. They're kind of a get out of death free card. I guess they cost about 5 exalts, so get out of death for 5 exalts card. That's pretty decent. Now you can only trigger one per zone from combat, so it's only one per simulacrum, and they won't prevent one shot, so they're not perfect, but they are decent. And then I think the biggest tip really is just simply to swap your build around. You really don't need as much move speed or clear speed. You don't need as much damage as you do with like bossing, like hunting down max level Arbiter of Ash or King of the Mist. That's just not as important for Simulacrum. What you really need more of is evasion and energy shield or mana, depending on whether you're using Chaos Inoculation or Mind Over Matter or whatever. Chaos Inoculation is very good if it fits your build. More life would be good. Shame it's not in the passive tree. Stun Threshold is also pretty useful. Getting stun locked in Simulacrum is usually a death sentence. Stun and freeze immunity charms are both super valuable. For my build, I've been going with the stun charm because I get a lot of elemental ailment threshold from the passive tree. Getting more evasion or energy shield from jewels in the passive tree is a really good idea as well. And also, rarity just isn't very useful. Rewards are based on monster kills, but monsters themselves don't drop items, so this means the rarity on your gear or on your character is worthless. Probably. Okay, that's enough about setup. Now what do you actually do? What is the gameplay loop for success? It's actually really simple. You shoot and move, you shoot and move. You never stand still, you never get surrounded, you try not to stand in melee range for very long. Simulacrum really highlights the fundamental weakness of melee in the ARPG genre and in PoE 2 at the very least. The only way they can ever really compete with ranged is if they are either just also ranged, such as the build I'm playing, or Lightning Strike in PoE 1, or if they deal preposterous amounts of damage like Mamba Strike in PoE 1 and, I don't know, like File Not Found in PoE 2, or if they can move while attacking in a way that ranged cannot do. I think that works for Cyclone in PoE 1, but it's functionally the exact opposite in PoE 2. Range can move and attack. Most melee builds kind of can't. Ice Strike can. It's very good. Tempest Flurry moves uncontrollably and kind of sucks, I think, but Mace builds might as well just be wearing cement shoes, and most of the other staff skills really aren't that great either. This bothers me because I am a noble melee enjoyer. I'm like a strength faith Elden Ring person and a pure strength alpha in all the Dark Souls games, and I tank, and wow, I want melee to not suck, but here we are once again, right? And so that's kind of it. Continuous circular movement and attacking really is the key to never getting leap slammed, surrounded, or stunned, and those are the things in Simulacrum that kill you. This is why those rare monster mods I mentioned earlier are so incredibly bad, and it's why the version of Simulacrum before patch 0.1.1 with monster immunity and knockback when they spawned was so bad. The only other danger is the bosses, and they are really dangerous in the first seconds of arriving, especially if you are still dealing with a rare monster, and that overlap is pretty common. Now, should both bosses spawn at the same time? Probably not. They don't in PoE 1, but at least for now they do in PoE 2, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. And that 1 or 2 second window is the make or break moment of each wave. You have to disengage from the rare and account for the larger threat of the two bosses. Once you're adjusted and dodging both of the bosses and the rare, then you want to cleave down the rare while also fighting the bosses. Omniphobia tends to wind up big, slow attacks that effectively make him stun lock himself, so he's less of a threat than Kosis is, at least in my experience. You still want to be sure that you don't let any of Omni's big hits land on you, or they will probably kill you. So because of that, I focus more on Kosis until one of them is dead, which usually only takes a few seconds. The bosses really are not very tanky, and they are very vulnerable to stun, electrocute, and freeze, so CC is pretty great. Once they're taken care of, you just clean up the rest of the wave, and then you're good to go. Rinse and repeat that over the course of 5 waves or so at the end of the Simulacrum, and that's Simulacrum, baby. Enjoy your new crappy unique helmet, probably, and 2 more Delirium Atlas passive points. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it for Simulacrum. I obviously have some criticisms, but I think it's actually a pretty good improvement over PoE 1's version of Simulacrum. If it gets the Arbiter of Ash treatment and you get 6 portals, that will make Simulacrum a lot less valuable because the chance of failure is much lower. So I don't 100% know if that is the fix that GGG should or will go with. I don't really know either way, truly. I do think there's probably room to budge somewhere, but right now they do feel overtuned, and they are effectively functioning as a locked gate in front of the best farm mechanic in the game. I hope these tips are useful in helping people break through the difficult wall of that first Simulacrum, because it really is worth the struggle. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it. We're getting pretty close to 20,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone for us. And if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and good luck in Simulacrum. Bye.